Welcome back, everyone, to the Break Vape podcast, episode 22. I'm your host, Tami Ernst. Today, we are having a guest on the show, David Milan. He's a leader at Milan Coaching and Training in Australia. He is an accredited mental health practitioner, trainer, coach, and presenter who is known for his work as a behaviorist and as a human hacker. I absolutely enjoy my conversations with David that we've had thus far. He drops so much value in such a pristine way. Today, we're going to cover a lot of topics. It's just a broad range of chit-chatting about vaping and addiction and mental health and all the things. So, David, welcome so much to the show. I'm glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Tami. It's wonderful to be here. It's a lovely day in paradise today. So let's get started.
Great. Let's go. It's a lovely day in Houston here as well, actually. So can you tell me about your background?
I'll give you the quite abridged version. I started in the military for about 9 years, and that's really what got me interested in behaviour. I mean, before that, I am someone who has experienced complex trauma, but I won't go into the complexities of that because that is very complex. Joined the Army, spent 9 years in the Army, learnt to drive Leopard tanks before I learnt to drive cars, which was very interesting. And then I became a private investigator for approximately 2 years with my own business, A Delta Investigations. And then I decided to become a social worker. I'm married with some children, and the idea to become a social worker was because I wanted to kind of give back to the community. Once I got into social work, I realised that you always start off on the bottom and you're trying to work to the top. So I ended up deciding to work in the mental health space because that's where the most, I believe that the most good work could be done for me, for my kind of the way that I see the world and work in the world. So I spent time in the child and adolescent and adult mental health space as a clinician, and at times I was a senior social worker, but at times team leader as well. And then I went into private practice, as you do. And it was really in private practice that I understood that there was a lot of things that were missing in the way that we do business. I'm very much about the human perspective, understanding people from the human basis. In other words, I call this nature. Mm-hmm. In other words, our coding, how we are encoded as people. And then adding...
That's where the human hacker part comes in.
Yeah. I call myself that mainly because I speak a lot in computer terminology. Mm-hmm. Back in the 70s, the 1970s, a long time ago for some, a lot of the therapeutic practice was using that language, and we moved away from that for a long time. But now I believe we can kind of move back to that because our nervous system and our whole system is pretty much coded. And I always say, like Dr. Daniel Siegel in the US says, if you can name it, you can tame it, which means if you understand the system, you can work out what to do about it. And often what I find is people will come to me, sit on my couch and say, David, I really, really, really want to fix this problem or change this problem, yet I only want the solutions. And I want to do that really quickly.
We've got to understand what the problem is first. And when it comes specifically to vaping, for so many of us, especially we have been vaping for years, it is buried in our subconscious brain, kind of like a white plastic ping pong ball or something that you literally have to envision plucking out of your brain and putting it on a table so that you can examine it and analyze it. And from there, you can name it to tame it, feel it to heal it, and analyze it and make a plan. That's
right, Tami.
yeah, that's kind of a way that I get my my clients and my friends and my listeners to think about it too. We just want to unbury it from the subconscious mind, bring it into the thinking brain. So I was just leading off of what you were saying from name it to tame it.
Yeah, and the understanding the system is, I guess, what I've specialised in over probably well over 35 years, really. And what I understand about the system, and the system is the whole body, from the top of the head all the way to the soles of the feet. We're a whole system. And we're not devoid or separate from nature or biology. We're actually intrinsically entwined in that. Mm-hmm. And often we forget, and I call it the thinky mind. The thinky mind is often making up stories about what it wants to be reality. Yet the system is deciding that there's a whole different trajectory that we're taking. And to understand the human system is to really understand how it's coded. So this is where your hacker comes in.
So now, do you think addiction could be some kind of coding, perhaps?
Everything's a code. Everything is a code. It's fascinating that way. Because when I work in the field, because I work in the field with my clients, so I might have someone with significant social anxiety, yet they want to connect with somebody. So I do field work. I take them into the field. I model behavior. I don't just talk about it. I model it. The strategies are given, and they are done by me as well so that they can see the outcome. Because that's a better way of coding than just sitting in a lecture hall or in an office.
That's so interesting. Can you give me an example of how you model behavior?
Absolutely. So if we can imagine that the code is created by sensory data, so everything that you are experiencing is experienced in the now, and it's encoded throughout the whole body. Mm-hmm. For example, the proprioceptive data, where we are in time and space, you remember that. You remember that it's coded. It's coded in your physical body. As Dr. Van der Kolk will tell you, the body holds the score. So if I have my hand out in front of me, there's part of my unconscious and subconscious process that understands that means future. Mm-hmm. If I have my hand behind me, that means past. So I can actually start to code my system just even with a hand movement. So if I throw something over my shoulder, like my addiction, my unconscious doesn't work in thoughts. It works in symbols, images, feelings, metaphors. It's not working in thoughts. Thoughts are really just the intention. And so if I add all of my senses together, what I see, what I hear, what I taste, what I touch, what I smell, where I am in time and space, and whether I'm safe or unsafe, which is probably neuroceptive, it's an internal safety. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm safe or unsafe, that is so critical, because every human behavior is about safety. There's nothing else at the bottom of the code but that.
Absolutely.
It's safety, safety, safety.
Absolutely. So, I'm always wondering how we can create emotional safety in our own lives. And that's a great metaphor, you guys, for everybody listening, just thinking about your addiction and your vaping and, you know, literally holding your hand out in front of you and then throwing your addiction behind you.
That's it. So I won't say most, but a lot of people just try and work in the brain. I call them heads on sticks.
Why?
So they're always up here, and they're trying to solve an emotional problem cognitively, and you can't. You cannot solve an emotional problem with thoughts. It's impossible. An emotional problem is solved with understanding how the emotional system works, and then using the same code like you would if you were a hacker. You wouldn't use a different code to work with another code. You'd use the same code.
What if you're thinking about your emotions, though?
If you're thinking about your emotions, it's a feedback loop. Uh-huh. So you're thinking about your feelings, you're activating your feelings, but at the same time, your feelings can activate thoughts. So it's actually a feedback loop. Mm-hmm. The more you think about it, the more you focus on it, where attention goes, energy flows.
Oh, sure. Like your reticular activating system in your brain. We had a whole episode over that. For those of you that are listening, if you haven't heard about your reticular activating system, the RAS, I believe it's on episodes 18, maybe 17, if you want to go back and check that out.
And that ties in with emotional refraction, where we're filtering through the feeling that we're actually having. According to Dr. Paul Ekman, we're filtering through the feeling. Now, feelings are stronger than words, and I can prove that easily. They're stronger than thoughts. It's very easy to prove. How many people have sat on the couch, watched Netflix, eaten chocolate, thought they should be doing the dishes or the housework or something else, yet they haven't got off the couch?
That's buffering right there. It's buffering big time.
That's it.
Yes, we are trying to avoid our negative emotions of having to go do the dishes. And instead, our brain is telling us to get our dopamine hit from sitting on the couch and overeating and over Netflixing, my friends. Yes, David, I totally understand where you're coming from.
And that's it. So that's how feeling is stronger than thought. Mm-hmm. Feelings are stronger than thoughts any day. So why not let's just work in the feelings, or not just the feelings, but why not go to the source? And that's what I did. And so if you ask me a question, how do we model this? Well, we don't learn by words, because words create meaning, and everyone has different meaning for words. And we did that little camel exercise, and we can do it with your listeners now if you like.
Sure.
So listeners, and Tami, of course, I'm going to say one word, and I'd like you to tell me the first thing that pops in your mind when I say this word. Are you ready?
Ready.
Camel. What popped into your mind, Tami?
Bite. The word bite.
Bite.
Because when my last experience being near a camel, it bit someone. So bite.
Perfect. So we have bite.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I do this in workshops and in my training and in the fields, because I do a lot, as I said, I do a lot of field work, I will have humps, I'll have camel cigarettes, I'll have sand, I'll have broom where they do camel walking. I'll have all sorts of meanings for one word. Isn't that interesting? Just one word. So if we add words together, like three-legged camel walking backward up a hill, following a magician with a flowing purple robe and solid oak staff. Wow. How many of you were able to stay with that?
I thought I was with it for a while. I thought I was with it maybe for the first third of it, and then definitely mentally trailed off.
Exactly, because we zone out.
Yes.
So words don't really teach us. What teaches us is experience, and experience is in the senses. And so what I will do with a client is when they're socially anxious and they're standing there and they want to talk to this person over there, because usually it's about having conversations and connection. First thing I will do is I'll get them to ground themselves in the body.
Oh, how do we do that?
How do we ground ourselves in the body? We've got to feel where we're standing. We've got to really feel into it. So if you're standing up, you want to feel your feet. You want to feel the ground underneath you. You want to push down through your legs into the ground. And you want to feel that ground, and you'll notice something really interesting. As soon as you do that, where does your attention go?
Probably to the ground.
Exactly. It's not into your feelings, right? It's into the ground. So if you're sitting in a chair right now, Tami, I want you to sit in the chair and really feel the chair. Really? How does the chair feel? Is it soft? Is it hard? How does it feel?
Just feels a little hard and a little soft at the same time. Now I'm thinking about the chair.
Yeah, exactly. Feel the feeling. Now, if you're having an addiction and you're thinking about having a vape, yet you're starting to notice the chair underneath you, you've got two codes running.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine if we had more senses to that.
All right, I'm following.
So now we've just got a feeling. Yeah. So let's say I want to know, what are you hearing around the room? So my client, I'll say, what are you hearing around the room? Are you hearing the sound of my voice? Are you hearing the sound of the voices of others? What are you hearing? In a studio, you're probably not hearing much at all. What are you hearing, Tami?
Oh, in the studio, I'm just hearing us right now. I'm trying to imagine, though, if I'm out and about, what I would be hearing. Yeah. Probably all kinds of noises coming in and out.
Exactly. And we want to verbalize these out loud, because when we speak out loud, it's almost in our brain like someone else talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
If you just think it in your head and you're stuck in your head, not the best.
What
because our heads often...
What if you write it down?
That's okay.
Does that kind of be
best,
the same as verbalizing it?
It is. You can read it back to yourself. It's fine. The best way is to say out loud, if possible. Although it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things how the information is processed, because it's all processed in a way that the conscious mind is aware of it, because it's about having that awareness of this stuff.
Okay.
The unconscious knows about it. It's recording data all the time. Every millisecond or even quicker, it's recording all this data. And it's storing this data. And if you imagine your unconscious mind like a huge room, like with a domed ceiling,
big room,
and there's all these pictures on it, but they're all in different orders. They're not in any logical order. That's how your unconscious stores data.
Oh, it's a mess in there.
And so it's a mess in there.
It's a mess in there.
Not to the unconscious. The unconscious is just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to go and pluck a certain piece of data off the wall, I've got to focus on it.
Kind of like my ping pong ball analogy that I use. Would that be kind of plucking one of those pieces of data? Okay, so we ground ourselves, and then is that when we look for the data, or are we going to do something different?
Oh, we're still grounding.
Okay, we
haven't finished grounding. We're still grounding. I'm just going slow to explain it to your audience. Yeah. So now I want to see what I see. What do I actually see? What do I notice? What colours are people wearing? How are they standing? How are they sitting? How are they moving? I'm going to ask these questions. And meanwhile, my client is now focused completely away from anxiety, completely onto what I'm asking, because if I say don't think about pink elephants, what's going to happen?
Oh, my friend and I were just doing this the other day. How funny that you use that analogy. Yes, absolutely. You're going to think of a pink elephant. And then she and I were talking and said, okay, well, now try to think of a pink elephant with purple spots. And neither one of us could just not think of it.
Exactly. Because in the unconscious, don't means do. It has 18 rules, and I'm not going into those now.
Okay.
One of the rules of the unconscious is it's literally everything happens in the now. So for it, there's no time. It's just all happening in one big clump. It's the conscious thinking mind that likes to say, we've got a future, we've got a past, and we've got a now. It understands that. We need that. But in the unconscious, which is really closer to the basic operating system, it's storing data. And it's releasing data dependent on what the system is determining is safe or unsafe. And so you've got a subconscious, which is full of all your patterns and habits. So in an addiction, that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got an unconscious that stores data in the whole body. A subconscious where the data starts to move up into more awareness, but it's still below your conscious awareness of all your patterns and habits running like code. So if I'm looking at my machine this morning, this laptop in front of me, if I checked on its functioning, there'd probably be about maybe 300 or 400 programs running in the background. That's your subconscious. Now they're running automatically. And all they're waiting for is sensory stimulus to activate them. And this is what's important about addiction, because that sensory stimulus can be anything. It can be where you're standing. It can be a sound. It can be a taste. It can be a feeling. It can be a thought. So it can be audio digital. It can be a thought.
Could that be a trigger, perhaps?
That would be what we would determine as a trigger. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, often we don't know our triggers.
Oh, especially with something like vaping, because it's been buried in our subconscious brain for so long that we don't even know what our triggers are. We just vape all day long. So we have to literally pull out the addiction, analyze it like it's a ping pong ball sitting on the table, and then around that figure out what our triggers are. For instance,
exactly.
I some of the work that I do with people is to have them reset some of their patterns. So, maybe if they vape when they walk their dog on a certain route, we'll change up the way that they're doing that, or we'll change up their morning routine, and we'll mess with that subconscious mind.
Absolutely. You're messing with the pattern. You're messing with the habit. It's like a train. A habit is like a train going to a station. It starts, and I can give you a story about this to make it really clear, but it starts at the station and it gets to the other station almost automatically. There's no stops in between.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we're creating is a stop in between, or several stops. So for me, it's about becoming aware of that sensory data. That's our first step. So self-awareness, really, that's why I created the self-awareness method, for this purpose. So now we're getting more sensory data. So we've got what we're hearing, we've got what we're feeling underneath us or around us, we've got what we're seeing. What do we smell? What do we taste? Where are we in time and space? Am I standing at the back of the wall? Am I standing in the front of the room in relation to others? Because I do all the body language and linguistics of this as well. It's a holistic system. So then finally, am I safe or unsafe? And of course, the person's generally in the range of unsafe because they're having anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But after they've started to ground themselves, then we're going to do the next thing. I would have already taught them language patterns and techniques to connect with people. Now, if I'm doing this with someone for the first time, I will go through the whole process and they will just observe. They're just an observer, so that they can start to see that the process can be done and that it's safe. Now, how many times do I need to repeat a process before safety starts to happen? Probably about 10 or 15 times I'll do this on my own with them observing and then slowly becoming a part of the process.
Okay.
So they will start to become part of that connection process with this other human being.
Mm-hmm.
They will also have drills and skills to do, which is literally we will give them what to say. And these aren't lines. These are communication techniques that allow for you to have a pretty successful connection with a human being because you're creating certain elements. The first element you're creating, of course, is safety. The second element you're creating is a little bit of mystery. Third element is you're now creating a little bit of playfulness. Fourth element, you're connecting with values, a value system of the other person in a positive way. And the last thing you are doing is you're creating a nice rapport. So this is all modeled to them. So I might start with, hey, do you mind if I just ask you a quick question I'm really curious about? So that's usually the first thing I'd say to a stranger if I'm walking up to them in the middle of a market. Now, my client is freaking out because that's a stranger that I'm talking to. So their brain is imagining that they're talking to the stranger because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. And then we future predict the outcome of that. Oh, my God, I'm going to get rejected. They're going to slap me. They're going to do whatever.
It's the worst case scenario that you can ever imagine.
Exactly.
Going on in that messy brain.
And so what they see is they see the opposite of what they expect.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they start to, as we have a debrief, I'll ask them what they thought was going to happen. And this can be quite entertaining because I am 50% comedian.
Okay.
So they'll say, oh, I expected this or I expected that. Now I teach body language. I teach all of that. So I'll say, where were they standing? What was their orientation? What was going on? What was their facial expression? And so what will happen is they're now having a challenge in their code, but it's a real challenge. It's not just, I'll go out and do this thing, you'll be right. It's, I've shown you can do this thing. So now you've got these two different sensory codes going like this. One is a predictive code that suggests a bad outcome. Another is a real-life sensory code that's now encoding in the now. And in the brain, whatever we learn latest or the most recent, the brain will always try to emulate first.
Okay.
So the old pattern is there and it's strong, yet now there's a cognitive dissonance. Now there's a challenge to that pattern. So what I have to do now is I have to keep modeling this and introduce this person slowly to the process. And it's really important because they'll have a window of tolerance, a capacity for coping with their feelings. Now, when they first start this, they're on what I call war footing. So they're very close to massive anxiety attack.
Wall footing? Is that what you said?
War footing.
Oh, war footing?
As in going to war. Yeah, they're about to go to war. They're about to go into battle. They're in fight and flight and freeze.
Okay, they're super anxious.
So they're super anxious. These are my clients. I work with the most socially anxious, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they're at war footing. They're not in overwhelm yet, but they're in war footing.
Okay.
Now, as we model this process, and they're also doing box breathing as well. So as they model this process, they're imagining it's them. They're seeing a worst case scenario, yet it's not them because their conscious mind understands that, but their unconscious doesn't really get it yet. So as we keep doing this process, they start and they get introduced to this process physically. And then they start to use some of their skills to be part of the conversation with me, with the other person. Then they're eased gently into this pattern change. Now, the trick will come, and it's the most funniest part, well, the most interesting part, should I say, is when they have to do it by themselves. So I will watch and I'll be close, but I won't be involved. And that's when you see this amazing change in behavior, because they've really got to push themselves to do this. Yet they've seen me do it so many times and they know it's safe. They've just got to follow the instructions. If you do your drills, get your skills, as Dr. David Schneider says. Mm-hmm. Do your drills, get your skills. Nothing will happen if you do not do the work. I have plenty of clients saying to me, "Oh, Dave, this didn't work." And I'll say, "Did you do it exactly as I told you to?" "Oh, no, I didn't do that. Oh, well, what can I do?" Did you do the work? So when they do the work, they are really encoding that they're pushing themselves through. They're leaning into the pain, the emotional pain, which is the same as physical pain in the brain. Mm-hmm. They're leaning into the pain. And they're increasing their window of tolerance because they're not using any substances like alcohol or vaping or any kind of drugs to kill that pain. And when we kill pain through artificial means, we actually physically lower our resilience, physically, to the pain. Anyone with an opioid addiction will tell you that. They feel more pain after a while on a pain medication than less. So literally the emotional pain tolerance is growing as they push themselves in. When they do the exercise and they do the sensory experience of the exercise, it codes very strongly. And as they do the exercise over and over again, about 100 times, really, we have to do this exercise in different scenarios and with increasing challenge. So it might be that we do it with me first, then it might be by themselves, then it might be with a group of people, and we just keep increasing the challenge to their tolerance window.
And I think it really does take about 100 times to reprogram your brain to start adopting a new habit or whatever you're doing to dopamine shift. So you were vaping and then you quit vaping and now you're going to do something else, maybe snack, and then we'll get to that later. Whatever you're doing, you dopamine shift and you do it, think your feelings, think about your thoughts and feel your feelings differently 100 times. And then you start to retrain your brain. It's amazing.
Exactly. Because it's a system. It really is a system. It's not Jedi mind tricks. It's not mystical. It is actually a system. And I bet you know
some Jedi mind tricks, though, David.
I'm not going there. It's a system. Mm-hmm. And its basic processing at its fundamental is safety, physical, mental, emotional, sexual, financial, spiritual. Really, its fundamental is just safety. But I've labelled them into categories so it can be understood. Now, safety means that it's comfortable and predictable. When it's unsafe, it's uncomfortable and unpredictable. And so what the system will do through the sensory data is it will ascertain that almost immediately. If it's uncomfortable, we'll move towards a painkiller. If it's or avoidance. Mm-hmm. If it's comfortable, we'll move toward it and test it out. And so what we have to do is we have to introduce a person to being able to manage the uncomfortability of the feeling. 100%. So when you have an urge to vape, that's an uncomfortable feeling.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go with vaping, you are now lowering your tolerance to quitting physically. If you sit in the urge for even 20 seconds without acting on the urge, you are literally starting to create a new neural network that says, you know what, I can do this.
Especially first you ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario that will happen if I just sit with this urge for 20 seconds or 20 minutes or 2 hours?
Exactly. And urges usually only last about 7 minutes, 15 minutes anyway, because the feeling is literally a state. So you've got feelings and you've got emotions. They're actually different. Feelings are the way the nervous system or the unconscious communicates with the conscious. Hey, it's a good feeling, therefore get more of it. It's an uncomfortable feeling, get less of it. Or kill it. So
for sure,
what this system does is it says, how do we get rid of this feeling the quickest possible way? Now, when we were young, we used to, we might eat a sweet, we might eat a lolly, and we feel better. A bit of chocolate, get a bit of oxytocin release, we might feel a bit better. Because we have, as Tami was saying, we have dopamine hits for reward. So we get rewarded for doing the fastest possible thing because that's the survival mechanism of the system. It's all about safety and survival. Now, what we've got to do is use this wonderful thinking mind up here that usually I ask to take a holiday to Jamaica and sip pina coladas on the beach while we work with the unconscious. However, at the moment, I want the thinking mind involved because it's the one that's going to assess this feeling.
David, when you're saying thinking mind, are you referring to your prefrontal cortex? Because I talk a lot about that with my listeners. Guys. So just for those of you who are familiar with the show and what we're talking about, we're talking about your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking mind that can plan ahead of time, which is very different than your subconscious brain where addiction usually lies. So your prefrontal cortex is like the parent to your subconscious mind.
Absolutely. It's the one that takes up the most energy and is last to get the memo for mostly everything. Mm-hmm. So the unconscious system and subconscious system is automatic and it runs. If you drive a car, you'll understand the system because you don't think about every single movement you have to make when you drive a car. Now, the unconscious system is an automatic system because it's programmed for efficiency. If you had to think about everything you did, like sitting on a chair, every time you sat on a chair, we wouldn't do anything. Now, the thinking mind or the prefrontal cortex has 9 functions, yet the function I'm looking for is the assessment and self-regulation function. The ability to regulate our feelings and assess our feelings and be flexible in our responses, response flexibility. In other words, which pathway am I going to take? And this thinking mind is the one that's got to sit with the uncomfortability of the feeling. And the whole system, the 85% of the rest of the system is going to be saying, you've got to get rid of this feeling right now.
You've got a buffer. Right.
Yeah, yet a feeling is just a state.
Right. Yeah. Your brain's going to be saying, you've got a buffer. You can't feel this negative emotion. Let's do something different.
It's a state. A feeling is a state. It is a communication from the unconscious, subconscious system to the conscious mind saying, hey, you've got to do something about this. Now, an emotion is the energy in motion of the feeling. So imagine all the chemical network in your brain and your body, and imagine the electrical system. All of that energy, which is real energy, is emotion. Now, that emotion, when we sit in the feeling, builds up. It becomes bigger. That's what that's what the real interesting part is about this system, is that when we suppress, we become depressed. When we express, we're actually moving the energy through the system. And anxiety, in a way, is a way of expression.
That makes so much
Depression.
sense. We were chatting the other day and you were saying you have to heal it to feel it.
Yep, you've got to feel it to heal it to reveal it, as David Schneider will tell you.
I said it backwards.
You have to
feel it to heal
that's
it.
okay. That's okay.
We're all human.
You've got to it's all right. It's all good. You've got to feel how you feel. And those feelings are unpleasant for a lot of the time, because pleasure is the point between two pains. We're not designed to be happy all the time. I love it when people come in and they say, what would you like to achieve from catching up with me? And they'll say, I want to be happy. And I go, wow, how are you going to achieve that? How's that working for you?
Well, what do they say?
They say, oh, well, they're confused. It's like, well, isn't that the goal of everything? And I'll say, well, for most people it is. Although, is it the reality? Let's get real. Most of the time we're up and down, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Which is actually the normal functioning of the nervous system. Somehow we've been taught we've got to be happy all the time. That is absolutely crazy.
How would we know what happiness is if we never had the opposite of it, though?
Exactly. You've got to have pain to know happiness. And dopamine and oxytocin and neuropreprin and a whole bunch of other hormones are working to create these moods, these feelings. And so we strive for that. But what I'm going to say is, what if we went straight down the middle path? What if we went to neutral? Imagine being on the neutral planet. So rather than being up or down, now it's normal to be up and down a little bit, right? That's normal. But what if we go for the middle? What if we become a witness to this experience rather than getting involved in the experience? Now we're starting to use these higher functions. Most of us, including me, are stuck in the experience. That experience we future predict is going to happen in the future, and we have past evidence to suggest it's real. I will tell you, reality is constructed based on where you sit and what your viewpoint is.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. When I'm talking with people about vaping, we chit-chat about, you have so much evidence that you have created for yourself that you vape. I used to do it all the time, and I didn't have very much evidence that I could quit. And I would quit and fail and try and feel absolutely horrible and beat myself up and feel like a failure. And every time I quit a little bit, I would create just a little bit of evidence that I could. And then I would take that longer and longer and longer. And then fast forward to now, creating the whole program that I teach about how to quit vaping. But absolutely. You've got to start imagining yourself having evidence of doing the behavior that you want, and then start to actually do it.
And that's an interesting thing you said, because it's very real, this missing the evidence. We see this all the time in the relationship world where I work in relationships. So, and I don't work with couples, but I used to. And if someone, this future predicting mind always will go with its constructed evidence, its memory, let's say. Unfortunately, memory is created through the lens of how we feel. So if I'm feeling angry, I'm now using the reticular activating system to look for things that fit with that anger. Now, if you're in front of me, you become the source of my problem suddenly. Isn't that interesting?
That makes so much sense. So good.
I'm now deleting all the positives. It's called a deletion. And I'm distorting reality because I'm not using my prefrontal cortex to say, hold on a second, 5 minutes ago we were best of friends. We've been friends for 20 years. Yet now you're the worst person in the world. How's that working? It's like when people get married, and I think I used this example with you last time, Tami. We don't go to the altar and we don't say, these are my vows. Okay, I'll be married for 9 years. We'll have a horrible divorce. We'll fight over the kids. You'll get half the property. I'll get half the property. You know, we don't say that. Then we don't say, I do.
No, that's not what we sign up for.
Exactly. In that moment, we're positively refracting, so we're feeling really good about life, so we're going to be married forever. Now, when we start negatively refracting and we start noticing how we feel negatively, we start negatively refracting, which means we're constructing memory based on that feeling and whatever evidence we have to back that up. And often that evidence is manufactured because we're feeling bad about it. So it's a very complicated situation here. And to stay in the middle path, that middle way, it's about imagining that everything, if you imagine a picture in front of you, you see a painting. Okay. And if I say to you, what do you see? You may say to me, I see a nice, beautiful forest. I'll say, that's interesting. So now you're seeing sensory data. But do you see the canvas underneath the forest? What's underneath the painting? There's a canvas. And is the canvas not blank? And is every painting painted on a canvas unless it's done by an art AI? So in actual fact, I want people to start looking at the canvas. What's underneath all this data? What's underneath all this experience? And what's underneath it literally is you are a blank slate and you can write any story about your life you want. No, any story you want.
That's so true. Once we learn this skill of managing our emotions, and that's really just how you create power for yourself, isn't it, David?
Personal empowerment and power control dynamics is probably what I do the most. In other words, how this power constructed and utilized. Everyone wants to be in control because control technically means safety. And we learn very early on who's got the power and who does not. Now, power is a shifting dynamic and power is actually constructed. It's not something that's set. So, for example, if I'm in a room with somebody and I'm sitting at the table and I'm technically the boss because I'm the employer, perhaps I have the power. That's perception. Yet what if I really need that employer's skills or employee's skills, Now, who has the power? They do. So now we've got to negotiate. So we're always negotiating with ourselves the power. So does the vape have the power? Is it the employer and are you the employee? Or do you have the power? Are you the employer and is the vape the employee?
That's a great question for our listeners to really imagine and really try that on for a minute. Great analogy, David.
Just imagine for a moment that this substance is going to have power over you for 15, 20 years. How's that going to feel for you? Mm-hmm. How's it going to work? Or do you want power over the substance? Now, it's really interesting. The only difference between having power over a substance and not is a feeling. Wow. A feeling. That's it. Just a feeling, an unpleasant feeling, but it's just a feeling. It's a state.
And that can be managed and planned for.
It can be changed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be changed. States can be changed. We do call them emotional state change drills. So literally, if I want to change a state, all I have to do is start to create another state. So when I am standing, feeling my feet, looking around the room, I'm starting to create another state in my body, in my neurology, because literally the physiology dictates the neurology. Again, the heads on sticks department would say that the neurology dictates the physiology, although if you want to go the slow way, you want to do it by thinking. If you want to go the fast way, you want to do it by feeling, by experiencing. So if we create an emotional or feeling state in the body that is different from the feeling state we're having now, the brain will select the new feeling state. So how do we do that? It's very simple. All we have to do for a moment is ground ourselves in that place, feel the sensory data coming in, feel the body, notice your feet, notice your eyes, notice your body, notice the sounds, experience the room, and notice where the feeling that's unpleasant is not. Not where it is, but where it is not. And you will find that where it is not is way greater than where it is.
So good.
So if I have a feeling of anxiety inside, I will say to my client, I'll say, where do you actually physically feel that feeling in your body? And they will usually point to their gut or their heart. Say, right, now close your eyes, feel your feet underneath you, notice your eyelids, notice the sounds, maybe notice your thoughts. Just notice your experience right now. And where is, how big is this feeling that you've got, this unpleasant feeling? Because we don't use words negative or positive generally in my work. I'll usually change the wording because as soon as I say negative, the association immediately is bad. As soon as I say positive, the association immediately is good. So I'll often say pleasant and unpleasant. So if I want to talk to someone about pain, I won't say, where's the pain? I'll say, what's your comfortability scale? How comfortable are you? How uncomfortable are you? Because this is the linguistics of it. Linguistics has its whole new kind of rules. So where is that unpleasant feeling? How big is it? And they'll go, oh, it's about the size of a tennis ball. Where is it sitting in your body? Oh, it's sitting in my gut. Okay. What I want you now is to give it a colour. Just give it a colour. First impression like the camel. It's yellow. Right. Because the nervous system communicates in colours, symbols and images. So the unconscious has its own language. That's okay. It's yellow and it's about the size of a tennis ball. Now, imagine for a moment, imagine literally everything outside that feeling. Where is it not? Is it not in your big toe? Is it not in your hands? Tell me where it's not. And they'll start to focus on the places it is not. And as they start to focus on the places it is not, the feeling will shift and change and become smaller because they've shifted their attention, but also now they're actually now constricting the feeling. So what I'll ask them to do is slowly but surely move the space that is not to the space where it is. Slowly but surely imagine for a moment that little yellow tennis ball is shrinking. Is it shrinking? Notice it shrinking. Just notice for a moment how small it's getting. Isn't it interesting how small it gets and what happens in your body when that little tennis ball, that yellow tennis ball gets smaller?
It is so interesting. And to add on to that, I've done a lot of this work myself. And when I'm noticing an emotion that is unpleasant and feeling where it is in my body and giving it a color and a temperature and intensity, if it's moving, if it has a texture, and then kind of think about it on a scale of 1 to 10 with maybe how intense it feels, and then do the work of sitting with it and letting it pass. And then the next time that emotion comes up, doing the exact same work, and then it's sometimes that number changes and fluctuates, and all of a sudden that feeling of anxiousness and stress, it's not a 10 or a 9 or an 8 anymore. Now it's maybe a 4 or a 2. I like to assign a number to it.
Yes, absolutely, because that gets your conscious mind also involved, because numbers are kind of that left hemisphere higher functioning, which is good. because you want an integrated brain. You want an emotional system, and you want we'll call it just for a minute, a rational system working together. Too much in the unconscious and we don't get the changes, too much in the conscious and, it's harder. So what we can do now is we can say, okay, let's put that feeling in our hands. So let's take it out of our body now, physically take it out like you do with a ping pong ball, yeah? Physically take the feeling out of the body, this yellow ball. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine holding it in your hands now. How heavy is it? Does it have a spin? Is it moving? Now you'll notice that things always seem to have a spin. Don't ask me why. It's complicated. Now, what would happen if it was spinning, and I'll say first impression, so they might go, oh, it's spinning left. It's going from left to right. So let's spin it the other way. Let's get our physical hands, proprioception, and move it like this. And let's spin it the other way. And as they spin it the other way, they might notice that the colour changes. Or not, it doesn't matter. And then as it's spinning and spinning and spinning, we might say at the count of 3, we're going to throw it over our left shoulder. We're going to put it behind us. 1, 2, 3, throw it over your left shoulder. They throw it over. I say, how do you feel now? I go, oh, it's gone. That's right. Although we've still got a hole where that feeling was. And what I'll ask a person to do is now feel sad or now feel the opposite feeling that they had, and they can't. They can't feel it because they've changed the state. Feelings are states. And so if we want to change a habit, we have to change the state. Now, we change the state in all sorts of ways. We change it by where we stand, where we sit, where we go. Like you said, if they're walking the dog, they walk a different route. Mm-hmm. If they're having sensory data, we change the sensory data. If they use their hands, which I always like people to do, because I was taught by David Snyder to do this, because they're using their proprioceptive system. They're using their hands. Their hands know in time and space what's what. So if it's over the left shoulder, it's gone. If they use a hand in front of them, then it's in the future. And I'll because of the body language, it's very interesting. When I see someone use their left hand to explain something, I know, because it's connected to the right side of the brain, I know that there's an emotional problem underlying that. They use their right hand, it's different.
The neurology of it is so fascinating.
Absolutely. It is fascinating. And, last but not least, if we want to change a habit, we can do it very quickly as well. We can use quicker drills, although we still have to practice, because that's quite, that might take 5 or 10 minutes to do that drill.
No, our listeners will love that, right? Because when we're vaping, we're all about instant gratification. We want to do things very quickly. So what would that quick drill look like?
A quick drill would look like this. It would be, okay, let's say these are all true stories. So let's say I have someone standing in front of a fridge and they tell me, David, every time I go into the fridge, I want to eat ice cream. And I think you've touched on this anyway, Tami. So, it may be very similar to what you do, but we'll see. And so they know that when they go to the fridge and they open the freezer, they see the tub of ice cream visually, they get a sensation and urge to eat the ice cream. Now, this person was probably about 68 years of age, was told that they would get diabetes. They were on the verge of diabetes. And their doctor said, you got to change this habit. And they came to me. They weren't a client or anything. They actually were coming. They were a partner of another client. So my actual client, they were a partner of the client. And they said, oh, Dave, can you help me change this habit quickly? I said, all right, we'll do it as quick as we can. I mean, we could use spending. That's another one. But this is I want a practical thing she can do, yeah. So I gave her this drill to do. I said, okay, when you go to the fridge and you see the ice cream, and I asked her, what could you do instead of reaching for that ice cream? The moment you see the ice cream, you get the urge, what are you going to do? And this is what she actually said. She said, I'll do 5-star jump. So, all right, that's good. Excellent. So what I want you to do is I want you to do 5-star jumps as soon as you see the ice cream. And as soon as you've done your 5 star jumps, I want you to go to the kitchen counter and select something else that you would eat. And she wanted to be healthy, so she said, a carrot stick. I said, okay, let's do that. So she was very dedicated to this exercise. So when she went to the freezer to see the ice cream, she'd see it. She'd do her 5 star jumps. She'd immediately, the kitchen counter was only not very close to the fridge, but they were there. Things were there for her. She'd pick up her carrot stick, she'd eat it, and then she'd just sit in that feeling of wanting that ice cream. She'd let the feeling pass. She'd go outside and do gardening, because it's not distraction. When we do other things, people say, but I'm distracting myself. Well, actually, no, you're following a new neural pathway. You're creating a new habit. It's not a distraction at all. In fact, I want you to create that pathway. I want you to go into the garden. I want you to do something different. So she did that, and it took her about a week to actually break that habit by doing the star jumps, picking up the carrot, doing the star jumps, picking up the carrot, going into the garden, and she did that. So as you were saying, it's about selecting something different. So if someone is a smoker and they've got their smokes or their vape at their bed head, or on their table next to their bed, we want to put a water bottle right next to that table, next to that vape, yeah?
For sure.
And so when they wake up in the morning, we ask them, there's only one cognitive change they've got to make. We ask them to grab that water bottle, take sips of that water bottle before they use that substance.
So in the example that you were just using about the woman doing the jumping jacks and then eating the carrot, she put the work in. She did the work.
Oh, she had to.
And then
do your drills, get your skills.
Yes. You got to, like you're saying, do that, do the work. And it's funny that you mention a water bottle by your bedside table, because when I'm working with people about how to quit vaping, sometimes we actually break our vapes and put them in a glass of water or something like that, and then I'll have them put that on their bedside table.
Yeah.
So first thing they see in the morning is just an instant reminder of, I broke my vape. We're not doing this today. This is going to have zero power over me eventually.
Absolutely. To be empowered over something, there's a part of us that has to really want that. Now, we call it secondary gain. So all addiction, all behavior in reality has what we call a secondary gain. So someone will say to me, I want to quit, let's say, vaping, for example. Yet they say, I can't quit vaping. So immediately, consciously, they're putting a block there.
Yep.
Can't means won't. So they're saying, I can't do this. I've tried everything. I'm now stuck. And I'm going to say, well, what do you get out of vaping? What is it? Yeah, what's the actual need? What need is it meeting? Because it's actually meeting a need.
The most common answer I've heard is that it helps with stress, but that's 100% false, because it actually creates stress. It hijacks the dopamine system in your brain.
Absolutely, because really what you're actually doing is you're doing a breathing exercise. Try using, we try, for example, using your what you use to vape without any solution in it, and just go through the same motions you would as you would normally vape. You will find that you'll get a very similar experience because you're breathing deeper. When we breathe deeply, we're in a way, like with the conscious mind, when I'm breathing deeply, especially through my mouth, I'm breathing in, I'm actually telling my nervous system that I'm relaxing. Every in-breath is rest and relax. Every out-breath is activation. So if I breathe deeply through my mouth or through my nose, preferably my nose, I'm actually telling my nervous system that I'm relaxing. So notice when you use a cigarette or a vape or anything like that you take a breath in. It's probably a fairly deep breath. And we associate that relaxation with that substance. So it's an association. What we want to do is make a new association, as Tami was saying. The broken vape is a new association. So in reality, all we are doing is we're trying to kill pain by associating something with something. Unfortunately, the thing that's killing the pain is also killing us. And interestingly enough, the conscious mind understands that, but the unconscious kind of doesn't get the memo yet, because it just wants the instant gratification. If we can delay the instant gratification just by a little bit, just by a tiny bit, we're creating a new pathway. Now, a new pathway is like, imagine like a bush track. It's only very small. Now, we want to make it a superhighway in our brain. We want to myelinate it as much as we can. A signal travels 10,000 times quicker down a fully reinforced or myelinated pathway than it does down a bush track. So, of course, the nervous system's going for the superhighway. It wants that first. But if we keep on persevering with our little bush track, it becomes a dirt track. Then it becomes a road. Then eventually it becomes a superhighway. Now you've got two competing pathways. Now, literally what happens to a habit that we don't follow is it's like weeds growing up out of the road. It's like undergrowth grows up. It's like the brain says, you know what, it's no longer being used, therefore we're going to file 13 it, we're going to push it back, we're going to put it somewhere. It doesn't go away though. So you can have quit something for 20 years and suddenly all of those triggers are there, you know, food, stress, conversation, and you are offered that substance. Hey, would you like this? It won't hurt you. You've been quit for 20 years and immediately you put it in your mouth and bang, that old pathway snaps back because it remembers. So we have to persevere at this. And we can make a really cool superhighway, a new one, nicely paved road, lots of traffic either way. And we will select that first. And eventually we just keep selecting that. When I quit alcohol, I did that. When I quit tramadol for 15 years, strong opioids, I did that. I've been through this process. I have done it a couple of times. And it was tough and it was painful. And I did not quit straight away. And I had many relapses because that's part of the stages of change. But every relapse was a learning lesson. There's no such thing as failure. Failure is when you give up completely.
100%.
So if we're still trying, we're not failing. We're just strategizing.
You're failing forward, but I would still, you're not failing.
Well, failure is only in my world is where I completely give up. But if I keep going, even if it's poorly, I'm still making progress. You see, people say to me, Dave, I've gone backwards. And I'm going to go, how did you do that? That's impossible. Did you get in a time machine? No, you can't ever go backwards because you can't unlearn what you've learned. So it's impossible to go backwards. All that's going to happen is you have a setback, which means your old pathway got reactivated for whatever reason. We've just got to reactivate the new pathway again, and guess what? We're on the train forwards.
I would add on to that too. I think a very smart thing to do would be to create a plan for yourself of if you relapse, how you're going to handle it. And I would say, first of all, make it a no judgment zone. Don't beat yourself up too much. Just get back on track and literally plan out what you're going to do if you have a situation where you relapse, and then get back on track.
Absolutely, because judgment is actually a natural feeling. All feelings are messages. They're not good or bad. When we apply meaning to a feeling, we apply it to the quality of the feeling. So anxiety, we say, is a bad feeling. And immediately when we say bad, we want to avoid it. Immediately. So what if I say it's a learning lesson? What if I say my anxiety, by the way, anxiety is exactly the same feeling as excitement. Exactly the same. So if I'm jumping out of an aeroplane with a parachute on, which is not what I want to do, even though I'm ex-military, there's no way I was doing that.
Okay.
If I'm going to jump out of a plane with a parachute, I'm going to feel a lot of fear because that's pretty dangerous, unpredictable, uncomfortable territory. Now, after a while, when I become used to that feeling, in other words, I've done it 100 or so times and I haven't died, then it becomes excitement. Then I'm looking forward to it. I'm a scuba diver, so I understand this concept very well. When you first go underwater, you're terrified. And as you start to relax into the feeling and breathe and relax into the feeling, you start to see and notice the surroundings. Before that, you're just noticing the oxygen gauge. But after a while, you're noticing all the fish. And even when you see a shark, which I love sharks, I'm seeing a shark, I'm going, wow, that's a really big shark. That's cool. Best be not swimming the other direction. So you start to really get into that feeling and that anxiety disappears. So any feeling All feelings have an emotional charge, and words actually activate that emotional charge. So what if I was to associate a feeling of, let's say, I don't know, judgment with I'm actually looking at a better way to do it. So really it's an assessment. It's not a judgment, it's an assessment. I've assessed that that wasn't the best thing to do going backwards in my planning, even though I don't go backwards. But let's say I say that. How about I go, okay, it's not a judgment, it's actually an assessment. I've made an assessment on my progress, not the happiest with my progress. However, I know that if I keep practicing, like if I learn a musical instrument, no one generally picks up a guitar or plays a piano without practice, unless you're a prodigy. And I'm not a prodigy at quitting stuff. So at the end of the day, all I've got to really do is, as Tami said, follow my plan. That's it. You're guaranteed to succeed. This is the weird thing. You're actually guaranteed to succeed if you just do your drills, get your skills, and follow your plan.
Good.
The part that's hard is the doing it. You know, the part that's hard is deciding, do I want to do it? Because the secondary gain is what stops us.
Absolutely.
The secondary gain is where the nervous system says this thing kills anxiety. It's more important than quitting.
Well, I think for both of us, the work that we do is going to help people not have to white knuckle whatever it is that they're going through, that they're trying to quit. For the people that I help, it's vaping. So you're still going to have to do the work. You're going to have to do the thing, but we're going to make it to where you're not white knuckling it the whole time. And you actually understand your brain and understand that you're human, and you understand why you're addicted to this and how to get off of the addiction, stay non-addicted, and then, like we were just talking about, make a plan for relapsing. Such good,
Absolutely.
Amazing stuff, David. I could chat with you all day long. I think we should definitely do a part 2 of this.
Look, I'm absolutely happy
sometime.
to do that. There's tons and tons of other stuff that you know we could certainly talk about in the context of anything actually, because the weird thing is, for me, it's all human.
100%.
So I'm gonna say same stuff, different day for me, because there's a process. There's literally a system that runs underneath everything that's pretty prescriptive. There are some changes to the system, but for the most part, it's pretty prescriptive. So if we just follow what we know is going to work, we are pretty much guaranteed it'll work.
So good.
The thinking mind sometimes stops that, but you know what? You're going to be fine.
That's right. You're going to be fine. David, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much for all of the value that you added today. And where can our listeners find you?
On our website is best. We have quite a few different podcasts they can listen to get more of a feel. mymilan.com.au. So my is in mine, Milan is in the Italian town. mymilan.com.au is our main website. There's information on that website, absolutely. We're on social medias. I'm the behaviourist.
The behaviorist.
That's what I'm known as.
Okay.
The behaviorist, because I deal strictly in the nature of humans. So behaviorist, or you can find me as David Milan, or if you're really keen, you can also look up, because we're in Australia, you can look up my name, David Szynski, in Google, and I'm number 1 in Google because I'm probably the only one of that name. But it's very easy. Just mymilan.com.au, and I work over Zoom. I no problems with video conference.
Fantastic.
Phone calls, no problems.
So you guys definitely
anything that helps you out.
Yes, for sure. Definitely go and check out David's website. He has a list of other podcasts he's been on as well. If you just are looking for some more to listen to after this one, then head over to his website at mymilan.com.au. That's mymilan.com.au. And I think there's a section that says in the drop-down menu podcast, and other things. And then you can listen to David talk some more. So definitely go check him out. And we're going to wrap it up for today, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. David, thank you so much for coming on. I encourage everybody to take back your power and create safety for yourself. And as always, if you need a little extra help in the form of coaching, you can reach out to me at hello@breakvapes.com. That's hello@breakvapes.com. And just say hi and introduce yourself, and we will chit chat about all the ways that we can help you quit vaping for good. And before we wrap up, David, is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, look, it's a journey. This is a journey. Quitting any addiction is a journey. And like any journey, we have to put that 1 foot forward first. However, when you're a marathon runner and you put that 1 foot forward, probably the first, 7 Ks is pretty painful. You're breaking the pain barrier. You're leaning into the pain. After that, you hit the wall. When you hit the wall, you feel no pain. And you can run forever. Technically, not really, but technically. And it's the same with any journey. So quitting vaping is exactly the same as this. It's a journey. You put that first foot forward. It's going to hurt a bit. It's not going to be pleasant. Mm-hmm. Although the end result is there's going to be no pain and you're going to be feeling a lot better off afterwards. I can pretty much guarantee that. And thank you, Tami. You're a wonderful coach, and Tami knows how to do this. She's experienced and she knows how to do this. So please talk to her if you have any questions or doubts. Talk to Tami. She'll help you out. Guaranteed.
Oh, thank you, David. Okay, everybody. I will see you next week. Bye.